Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to Spa-Francorchamps. We've got a little bit of a treat for you this weekend in terms of Radical racing. We've got a triple header of the Radical Sprint Championship and the Radical Enduro Championship as well. 3 50-minute races around the 7-kilometre challenge of the legendary home of the Belgian Grand Prix to look forward to. The first of those 3 races takes place this afternoon. It is a currently clear, slightly blustery, but not with the most optimistic a weather forecast that we're about to embark on this race. Talking you through it, it's myself, Ben Evans. Alongside me is Will Brown from Radical, and Will, a gigantic grid for the racing this weekend.
Yeah, fantastic 34-car entry here at Spa-Francorchamps, and true to the form here at Spa again, we've got changeable weather, and there's a possibility that we could see some rain later in the race. So it's going to be a really interesting day in terms of tyre choice and strategy. So
it's Jesse Mensker, the American driver, who starts from pole. Alongside him is John Harrison, then Jeremy Ferguson and Jamie Constable, Mike Cantillon and Tim Berriman. Watch for Scott Mansell. He will probably be one of the fastest of the Supersport cars. Then Harry Cockle next along. Simon Halton, a former star of the PR6s in Sweden, starts in 9th, just clear of Steve Burgess. Ben Dimmock, another spectacular driver who we have seen plenty of in the UK in the sprint series. Michael Vergers needs no introduction. Unfortunately, he introduced his car to the tyre wall yesterday, and so he has got plenty to do from 13th, just clear of Ricardo Dona. Paddy McLuhan, driver who hates standing starts but will probably enjoy the rolling start this afternoon. Brian Caldwell's team pretty much pulled an all-nighter to get him back on the grid. And then we understand that Stuart Mosley is going to be starting at the very, very tail of the field. He didn't get out to qualify yesterday due to various mechanical issues. So essentially we've got 2.5 races in one here, don't we, Will? Because these are points-paying championship rounds, the Radical Sprint Championship, the Radical Enduro Championship, but we've also got some of the cars that we're more used to seeing in the Radical European Masters appearing.
A little bit of a departure for the Sprint Championship competitors, undoubtedly, and this is an event they've been looking forward to all season, to come out here and really get a chance to drive this full GP circuit, an amazing and fascinating circuit, and obviously a longer distance race as well. So, you know, I would expect to see some of the really hot shot front-running guys in Sprint Championship are going to be right up at the sharp end today. They're all running with a mandatory 45-second pit stop time, whereas the guys in the Radical Enduro Championship that are sharing the grid with here will be running the various success seconds penalties that they've accrued from earlier in the season.
Exactly, and so it's a slightly shorter race than drivers are used to from the Enduros. It's a longer race than they're used to from the Sprint Championships. This should be very entertaining. As ever, we've got 2 types of car really in the race. We've got the SR8s and the Spiders, which comprise the Masters class, and then the SR3 RSXs and the SR3 RSs, SR3s, all in the Supersport class, which form the bulk of the field. The race has been declared wet because the local weather radar is suggesting that we're going to have some precipitation around about 2 o'clock this afternoon, local time, which is bang in the middle of this race. So the consequence of it being declare the wet races, we've got 2 formation laps to get ourselves up and running, which gives us an opportunity to introduce some of the runners and riders. And probably the big story this week is Jesse Mensker, who's raced very successfully Radical in the United States, coming over and putting the car on pole.
A real hot shot in the SR8 out in the Radical USA Cup. He's done a lot of racing at Club Spring Mountain, the Radical West Coast site in Nevada, and up at the various race circuits around Northern California as well. And a real star of IMSA racing as well, GT3s and Porsches out there. But no, to come here and first time out get a pole with an SR8 is a fantastic achievement for him. And yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how he carries on with the various pit stop strategies that play out during the race.
Another driver who has benefited from the global reach Radical is the red car. You see number 33. That is Tim Berriman, who is representing Radical Australia this weekend, and again he has done very well to put that car 6th on the grid.
Particularly as it's his first time out in the Spider, and it is a very different car to drive in terms of balance from the SR8 that we've maybe become more accustomed to over the last few seasons. But no, he really impressed. Oh, and a little bit of drama there on the warm-up lap. It looks like Paddy McLuhan's pulled off.
He does, and that's a great shame because Paddy was very much looking forward to the race today, because he's not brilliant at the standing start in these cars and was hoping the rolling start would propel him up through the field, but fortunately he is pulled over to the side of the track, and hopefully that car will get back underway and he'll be able to rejoin the action. The race hasn't started yet. We're still on this second formation. That the other American and Australian representatives are from Radical Australia, Kim Burke, who's out in the SR3 RSX, and then Ron Fletcher, who is representing Radical's United States operation in another SR3 RSX. I think the conclusion we can draw from that is that we probably need some live streaming coverage and on-site commentary from both the races in Australia and United States going forward for the deep background knowledge, Will.
That's absolutely right, yeah, and I'm sure the weather would be far better than it was here, and I know those guys were, we're looking a little bit nervously up at the skies today, and I mean, looking at our screens here, it looks like there's a pretty dry line out there at the moment, but that's set to change in the next 15-20 minutes or so.
The weather this morning was absolutely atrocious. It was touch and go whether or not we were going to get any running first thing, because visibility was down to around about 50 metres in the fog and the rain. The rain eased off a couple of hours ago. As I say, the weather forecast for later on this afternoon is not all that it could be.
And one of the things that you'll hear so often from seasoned veterans who come here and race regularly at Spa is that the weather could be so localised. So you'll find that it'll be bone dry up in the Grand Prix pit area and around La Source, but as soon as you get up to Lake Coombe or right down at the bottom of the circuit at Stavelot, it can be a very different story. And in fact, at the end of qualifying yesterday, a few of the drivers were reported rain down at Stavelot, whereas it was completely dry up in the pits.
At the moment, it is dry around the circuit. There is Paddy McLuhan's car, and that's going to require a little bit of retrieval. So really just making sure that they don't zig and zag anywhere near the stricken McLuhan. So it's the white car of Jesse Mensker on pole position. Alongside him is John Harrison. That is the orange-white machine. Then we have got Jeremy Ferguson. That is a blue car. Alongside him is Jamie Constable, the fluorescent orange and black machine. Now there is one of the drivers we expect to see shining amongst the Super Sport runners. That's Scott Mansell, who has been very rapid throughout 2015, and that's what you'd expect from a former race winner in Formula One cars. Yeah,
former Euroboss champion, of course, in the Benetton, and he started the year out sharing that car with another gentleman driver, but unfortunately, due to illness, he had to pull out. So Scott's been pretty much solo for the second part of the season, and he's done a fantastic job to sort of consistently score points at pretty much every single round.
Other cars to watch for progressing through the field is number 76, Michael Vergers, who is starting the car that he shares with Jeremy Cottingham. And those of you with thick and furry anoraks who are fans of Formula Ford 1600 will be getting excited to see Michael behind the wheel. Michael Vergers, who shared the podium with Mark Webber in the 1996 Formula Ford Festival, but was also star of the 1990 festival as well. Didn't win it, but is a spectacular driver.
And slightly close to home, of course, he was also the first professional driver ever to race a Radical all the way back in 2000. So, no, he's been with us a long time and scored our lap records at the Nürburgring. So a long history of Radical, and great to have him back on the grid here at Spa. I
remember seeing him when Radical first launched in a club sport at Castle Combe, the special GT race, and it's one of the most spectacular performances I've ever seen in a racing car. A wonderfully fluid driver. They're bunching up side by side, getting ready for the rolling start. 50 minutes of action ahead in the Radical Sprint Championship, Radical Enduro Championship as well. They have got a mandatory pit stop that's going to come during the course of the race, but this should be an awful lot of fun as the pace car about to peel off through the bus stop chicane, and then we'll be going racing for the first of 3 times this weekend. Have to filter their way through the bus stop chicane. A couple of the races earlier on today, they were holding them until quite a long time down the start and finish straight to make sure that those at the front of the field didn't gain an undue advantage. And the same again, they're forming up very nicely as we wait for the red lights to change, and we'll go racing here in Spa. This should be very spectacular. Away we go. It's 7 wide in the midfield as they sprint towards La Source for the first time. And it's John Harrison who gets the jump on Jeremy Ferguson and Mike Cantillon. Oh, there's contact between Metzger and Ferguson, and Cantillon gets caught up in it as well. So 3 of the front runners involved. A couple of the SR3s have tangled in sympathy as well by dint of having absolutely no way to go. Jesse Metzger looking for a gap to the inside, which suddenly closed. Jeremy Ferguson, unfortunately, eliminated from proceedings. It means we've got a big gap at the front of the field. I think Harrison and Constable, well, there's Jamie Constable. John Harrison has checked out and gone. The rest of them sprint along the Kemmel Straight.
Yeah, that's right, and he did really well to protect his line there from Mike Cantillon on the start, and possibly just a slight early break there to cover his line, really caught out the guys behind him and caused that ensuing melee.
The rest of the field all jinking through Les Combes. There is the number 8 car of former British Formula 4 champion Scott Mulvern, another driver we can expect to see fighting for Supersport honours. He is busily battling with Ricardo Dona. There's plenty of scrapping going on through the field. Steve Burgess in and amongst that, of course. Also making a very good start to the race is the car of Michel Frey, which he's showing with Marcello Maracciotto this weekend.
Yeah, Michel Frey, of course, an integral part of the Race Performance LMS team, and he's here with his good friend Marcel Maracciotto. Great to have Marcel back at Spa after that very high-speed accident here this time last year, and yeah, he's been chomping at the bit to get back in the car all season and get back here, and yeah, doing a great job.
Also looking to make progress is Harry Cockle. He looks the inside of Ben Dimmock as they sweep through Fania, and no way to defend that for Dimmock, so Cockle gains the place. He sets off in pursuit of the British Racing green and orange car of Steve Burgess. Now here is another look at how it all went wrong at the start, and yeah, Jesse Menska just snatching a break and jumped on the anchors, couldn't get the car stopped in time. Jeremy Ferguson turned in, and those behind getting involved as well. I think that was John Corbett who
I think just tipped Martin Verity there into a reverse spin.
And that's just sometimes what can happen when it all gets a bit congested in front of you. Here is Jamie Constable. There's behind Scott Mansell. Oh dear, makes a little bit of contact with Simon Halton. And Halton is halted. He rotates. Scott Mulvern, rather.
But both he and Dimmock there forced to go across the Exeter bus stop and rejoin, but that's cost him a few places as well. And already you can see there Stuart Mosley scything his way back through the field, has just closed right up onto the tail of Scott Malvern.
The order then at the end of the first lap is John Harrison leads, Jamie Constable is second, Tim Berriman is third, Michel Frey is fourth, the leading Supersport class car from Brian Caldwell, Harry Cockle, Steve Burgess, Scott Mulvern next along, then Michael Vergers and Ben Dimmock. Here comes the challenge from Tim Berriman on Jamie Constable. This is the fight for second and third place. Berriman looks to the inside of Constable as they arrive into Les Combes. No way through. This is the beauty, well, isn't it, of Spa, with so many long straights and so many overtaking spots around the track. You don't sometimes get that frustration you get on some tracks where there's one or two key passing points. Here, almost every corner you can try and force a move.
And with those long high-speed drags, with these cars being such sort of aerodynamically dependent cars, they cut quite a big hole in the air, so there's a real opportunity to get a toe on that run up to Camel and make a dive into the chicane.
Jamie Constable, the bright orange and white car, Tim Berriman behind him. Then we have got this scrap going on at the fore of the Supersport class, and it's Brian Caldwell who's up there. Michel Frey has disappeared. It's Caldwell clear of Harry Cockle and Steve Burgess, sweeping through Fania. Fight for second and third place. John Harrison, the race leader, is a long way clear of this. His lead at the end of the first lap was in excess of 7 seconds. Here's another look at Scott Mulvern's moment. Just a little bit late on the brakes and tapping the 87 car of Simon Halton. And part of that is that it's not a particularly warm day in Spa, and one or two of them may have just been caught out a little bit by how long it's taking to get the heat into the tyres.
Yeah, just seeing a little bit of moisture, of course. Most of the guys elected, I think pretty much the entire field elected to go out on slicks. And as you say, the low temperatures, a little bit of moisture, and that first lap nerves is just going to cause a few brake lockups, a little bit of ruthlessness, I think.
Well, any of them that went out on wets are in for a fairly torrid time of it. Now, up into fourth place then was Stuart Mosley. We just caught a glimpse of Stuart. There he is at the head of the next queue as Berriman darts the inside of Constable into La Source. Gets it all wrong, runs out very, very wide, in fact, Tim Berriman. That's good news for Stuart Mosley.
And it's fantastic news for John Harrison as well, of course. This ensuing scrap has given him nearly an 11-second lead over the first two laps. So he's looking very, very strong now to carry that lead into the pit stops.
Well, now we're going to get a sense, I think, of the true pace of Berryman, because Jamie Constable's got a little bit of daylight. How quickly can Berryman chase it down? Amongst the super sports, it's Harry Cockle from Brian Caldwell, then Steve Burgess with Scott Mulvern, as we understand it, and not Nick Jones just behind him. That's Scott's helmet. And Scott looking to make maybe a 2-for-1 pass here. He darts the inside of Steve Burgess, who in turn looks the inside of Brian Caldwell as they head along the Kemmel Straight. On the brakes to Lecom, it's Steve Burgess who is going to gain. He moves the inside of Caldwell and takes the place.
Yeah, and Steve's got to be patient here. He's, of course, the current leader in the Enduro Championship overall standing. So I think patience is going to be the key here, and he's chasing down Cockhill, who's his closest championship contender right in front of him.
Steve Burgess, though, running a little bit deep into the Bruxelles hairpin. Did he gather that up? He did just about at the end of the turn. And looming large, the white car, number 76, there is Michael Vergers, who's looking to join in this scrap as well. Now it's the turn of Scott Mulvern to look to challenge Brian Caldwell, but this is the section of the circuit where it's still just that solitary dry line, and therefore Mulvern couldn't challenge into Pouan. Here is the 5-second place, and certainly Berryman has got the legs over Jamie Constable. Now for Stuart Mosley, what he would like is these two to start scrapping. That will allow Mosley to close down the 8 or so seconds that he needs to get onto terms with this fight for second place. Sweeping through towards the end of the third lap.
And indeed, it looks like Stewart's on for a fastest lap. So yeah, he's slowly reeling it at the moment. There's some 8-second deficit back to this duo, but you know, on this current pace, he's going to be up there within the next 2-3 laps.
Through the bus stop chicane, already across the line is John Harrison. Harrison sets the fast lap of the race at 2 minutes 22.8. And his lead over Jamie Constable in second position as a result goes out to the best part of 13 seconds. As Berryman again looks to the inside of Constable into La Source. And this time round, Berryman keeps the car within the track margins, but he still can't seal the deal and pass Constable. It was a 2 minutes 22.4, by the way, for Stuart Mosley in fourth, and he now has the fast lap of the race.
You do sense that the Berryman's fastest in the middle sector, whereas Constable's perhaps got the legs in the first and final sector of the lap. Having said that, he looks closer now than he has been the last couple of laps, and in fact, yeah, he's looking to the outside. Jarks looks one way, looks the other way. Is he going to be close enough to get on the brakes there?
But it's all wet, isn't it, to the inside of the track?
It's very damp on that inside line, isn't it?
And that's the frustration for Tim Berryman. Good defensive driving from Jamie Constable. He knew that Berryman could sit behind him as much as he wanted, but couldn't find a way to jink past. There is photosynthesis in action at Lecom, and here comes our leading supersport car. It is Harry Cockle. Cockle in fifth has eased away from Steve Burgess. Meanwhile, down out to the left-hander is, and on towards Pouan, Jamie Constable. He has got Berryman tucked behind him. Stuart Mosley on for another good lap here. And we've got this superb battling going on behind. Scott Mansell was one of those drivers who was caught out in the first corner. He is recovering masterfully. He's already moved past Michael Vergers and Brian Caldwell. He's up onto terms with Scott Mulvern. And what that first corner drama gave us was a slightly jumbled order amongst the front runners. It means we now got some excellent recovery drives.
Yeah, and all the while we're about to see here Verge looking at lining up a move on Brian Caldwell as well. Couldn't quite make it stick there on the way into the Piff Path, but will he be able to do the rundown onto Blanchimont?
Part of the challenge today for the quicker cars is where do you overtake when it's still damp offline. Really, if you're the likes of Michael Vergers or Scott Mansell, you'd actually prefer it to start raining, because at least then
it gives you more options.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. It gives you more freedom to pick and choose your lines. You know, whereas here, really, there is only one ideal line at the moment, and they're all sticking pretty closely to it.
Vergers in pursuit of Caldwell as Scott Mulvern has found a way past Steve Burgess, and Scott Mansell about to do the same.
Thinks the better of it as they run into the bus stop. Just keeps mindful of staying close and maybe giving himself an opportunity into La Source.
Stuart Mosley could be on for the win here. We're watching the fight at the front of the Supersport class. Fourth place Stuart Mosley has just set the fastest lap of the race with a 2 minutes 20.8. Now, crucially, that was 2.5 seconds faster than John Harrison at the front of the field.
Yeah, the big question is going to be if it rains, then how can Yapkin respond on wet tyres? You know, we see quite a few quick single solo drivers here. They're going to be used to the track conditions. They're going to have a good feel for how the track is changing if they're out in the first sector and it starts out in the first half of the race and it starts to rain. So yeah, this is the fascinating dynamic of the Enduro Championships and also the Radical European Masters have been here so often in the past. It's that, you know, managing your tyres and just keeping an eye on the weather and the changing situation around you.
Meanwhile, Scott Mansell thinks about lining up the move to the inside of Steve Burgess. Once more, Burgess can take full advantage of the fact that you just can't dart to the inside at the end of the Kemmel Straight because it is greasy offline. Here is the fight for second, third and fourth. It's all changed. Tim Berryman up into second position. Down to third is Jamie Constable. Suspect that is going to become fourth in fairly short order because Stuart Mosley has already reeled him in. And Mosley looking to the inside. Jamie Constable having absolutely none of that. Moves across, claims the racing line. And this is going to be a challenge for Mosley, which is trying to find his way past a car which, to all intents and purposes, is identical, barring one or two setup tweaks. Yeah, and a little bit different here. The RXC Spider new for 2015, and it's a bigger car, a wider car than the SR8 that it effectively replaces. So that of course makes overtaking even more difficult when there's two of you side by side. Particularly on a circuit as fearsome as Spa. That said, Mosley gets a good run out of Blanchimont. Is he going to be in a position to leap to the inside on the brakes of the bus stop chicane? No, he's not. Thought about it, couldn't do it, and instead Constable closes back up to Tim Berryman. I think where Berryman's suffering, Will, is he's just that little bit more tentative, not unsurprisingly, being his first time out in the car, in the heavy braking zones for the bus stop chicane and now La Source. Yeah, that's right, and it's that slow speed areas when you're so much more dependent on the mechanical grip over the aero that maybe he's struggling just a little bit. You know, we just see a replay here of Scott Mansell looking at a very, very daring move around the outside. Has he made it stick? Yes, he has. Great stuff from Mansell. Good stuff as well from Stuart Mosley. He powers past Jamie Constable as they ran downhill towards Eau Rouge. Mosley goes third. Constable demoted to fourth. And this battle is now staying on a reasonably even keel with the pace of John Harrison. Harrison, having run out a near 14-second lead, is now running at a not dissimilar pace to this scrap for second. And we're only 6 minutes and 3/4 away from the pit window opening. It's a 10-minute pit window from when we've got 30 minutes left on the clock to we've got 20 minutes left on the clock. And given the forecast precipitation, it's got to be an argument for a lot of these drivers of leaving it as late in the pit window as they dare, in case it does rain and they can change for wets in that stop. Yeah, and at the moment the skies, although there's a fair amount of cloud cover, actually there doesn't appear to be any rain really in the air, certainly for the next couple of minutes. So yeah, there's going to be some anxious faces on the pit wall as they try to decide what the best move is, going into that mandatory 10-second pit window. One of the big challenges as well is because of the regulations, you're not allowed a huge extensive pit crew to change the tyres. Depending on whether you drive one or two drivers, you'll only have one or two pit crew to change them. So yeah, it does make a big impact on your pit stops if you need to swap. Here is Ben Dimmock, currently in 12th place. Of the Sprint Series runners, it is that red car you can see at the front of the queue, Brian Caldwell, who is currently to the fore of that. He has got Michel Frey just in behind him, then Michael Vergers. Ben Dimmock, the yellow and white entry, next up. Meanwhile, what a big slide there by Tim Berryman coming into the bus stop, and did really well to gather that up. But of course, what that's allowed is Vosey to close right up onto the tail of the Australian. It's the mechanical grip factor again, isn't it? And that's something that just comes with mileage and experience. Berryman has a good navigation of La Source on that occasion. Is it going to be good enough to keep Mosley behind him as they run downhill towards Eau Rouge? That was the challenge last time, but Berryman has got enough of an advantage. But Mosley will be able to use all the mechanical and aerodynamic grip through Eau Rouge, out of Radion and on to the Kemmel Straight, but he's not quite close enough at this stage to challenge.
Yeah, I mean, even though we're talking about a huge amount of an aerodynamic grip, you still saw a tiny little skip from Mosley's car there at the tail on the entry into Eau Rouge. Just momentarily stepped out of line a little bit. So, yeah, it's still very, very treacherous out there as they make their way into Lake Coombe.
Mosley just using a little bit less road than Tim Berryman, which is a sign that the pressure is beginning to mount. Mosley thinks about looking to the inside at the Bruxelles hairpin. That, unfortunately, doesn't yield anything. They then run downhill, flicking through the unnamed left-hander, which feeds them on to the double left at Pouan. Already both of them have gone some way to dropping Jamie Constable. The order currently is John Harrison leads. We're watching the fight for second place between the red car of Tim Berryman and the white of Stuart Mosley. Then it's Jamie Constable in fourth. Scott Malvern is now in fifth, and he leads the Supersport runners. From Harry Coughlin sixth, Scott Mansell in seventh, Steve Burgess in eighth, and Mosley looks for the move round the outside of Berryman as they get caught in the traffic, and Stuart Mosley pounces and moves up into second place.
Berryman momentarily brought there by the RXC coupe of Henk Toos, who's now moved out of the way, but yeah, Mosley could obviously see that opportunity was going to take place and took the opportunity to put his car alongside and take the place.
Now let's see what Stuart Mosley can do in the next 10 minutes or so. Here's another look at it. Toyce consults his mirror. Berryman thought there was going to be a gap. There wasn't. It opens one for the left-hand flick. Stuart Mosley fills it and sides past.
Now the question now is, with the pit stop window just 3 minutes away, is how much of an indent now Mosley can make on Harrison's lead. And we'll get an idea of that as he crosses over the line in just a moment's time. Yeah, 10.5 seconds, so already that gap's starting to diminish.
Just wonder at what point they're going to make the switch as well, don't you? Here comes Scott Malvern, who leads the Supersport race. He has now got Scott Mansell in pursuit. The pair of them have shaken off Harry Cockle. Now this should be a good scrap between the two Scots, Malvern and Mansell, both of whom in a parallel universe would have gone on to long and illustrious Premier Line single-seater careers, because they both more than aptly demonstrated in single-seaters early on in their career. Malvern in Formula Ford, Scott Mansell in the Euroboss series in the Formula 1 Benetton.
But if you look at the respective gaps between these three cars at the moment, of course we've got an interesting dynamic with the success seconds. So Scott Malvern and Nick Jones, from their results at the last time out at Snetterton, now mean they have 65 seconds that they'll be stationary in the pit stops. Scott Malvern on 70, courtesy of his success seconds, and then Harry Cockle and Ed Cockle will be stationary for just 55. So this order could well get shaken up as we go through those pit stops.
So you've got to wonder, in fact, whether or not there's any benefit here in Scott Malvern and Mansell working together, running in tandem, not slowing themselves down.
Yeah, that's right, and it would pay to pit on different laps, really, I think.
But surely the first point of business, one would suggest, is to break away from Harry Cockle. Meanwhile, there is Ben Dimmock to the inside of Michael Vergers, and also caught a glimpse of the recovering Jeremy Ferguson, who had been able to pick his way past both of them. Ferguson,
so replay of that, and Ben Dimmock did a great job to get that stopped in time and turn for the second part of the bus stop.
Jamie Constable in fourth. Just runs a wheel.
Stay on that AstroTurf. That cost Brian Caldwell dearly yesterday. It gets really, really slippery out on that green AstroTurf.
Yeah, I understand that Brian was asked in the paddock which end of the car did he damage, and he just replied both. Here is Tim Berryman in third place. This has been really impressive from Berryman. As he arrives through the bus stop chicane, we are at the end of lap 8. Here is the race leader, John Harrison. Now, what is the deficit? Stuart Mosley, it's down to 8.6 seconds. Mosley 2 seconds quicker than Harrison last time through. Mosley has got probably 4 more laps to play with here, so he may, pre-pit stops, just be able to snatch the lead.
Yeah, that's right, and all the while Tim Berryman, as you said, is looking pretty consistent there, well ahead of Jamie and continuing to pull away, so he's looking pretty good as well. Obviously all the Masters class cars that are here, because they're this isn't a radical European Masters round, so they're all running again the same 45-second pit stop, so it's game on really for them.
Certainly is, and for John Harrison, he would rather fancy his chances in the second half of the race. Stuart Mosley will hand over to Jaap Bartels. Tim Berryman and Jamie Constable are both doing the entirety of the race single-handedly. Jeremy Ferguson is up into 9th, but he's a minute off the lead of the race, and with them all having the same pit stop time in the Masters class, that is going to be that really, and remain fairly static in terms of gaining anything from the pit stop. So Ferguson will have to do that on track, and at the moment, because he's in amongst the Supersport cars, he can't quite do it.
Indeed, the pit stop window is now open, so just a minute and a half or a minute or so away from the first of those stops.
Because of the length of the lap here at Spa, there isn't quite the imperative necessarily for the race leader to jump in for the pit stop in the way that we've seen at other circuits, because they're not into the traffic, and so Harrison can continue to circulate unobstructed really to whichever point he chooses to duck into the pits. Whether or not he's going to make an early pit stop, we're about to find out, because he is into the latter stages of this 9th lap of the race. So amongst the Radical Enduro Championship contenders, it is Scott Mulvern, who is to the fore, and of the Sprint Championship runners, Brian Caldwell is leading that group of cars, but only just from Ben Dimmock. Harrison comes past the pit open board.
Yeah, the rules, of course, require you to pass the pit open board. Not all the time teams of drivers here will have a radio on board. So this is a way of equalising up and preventing the teams with radios from having an advantage over others. Everybody has to pass the pit open board before they can pit.
Harrison elevating his pace to set a personal fast lap of the race. That is a spinning Simon Hulton.
Is it Michelle Frey, perhaps, possibly?
Possibly, yes. Either way, lost a little bit of ground. Swooping downhill, that is Brian Murphy, who is currently in the battle for 20th position. Just ahead of him is Ron Fletcher.
Yeah, and then ahead of him, then you've got the other Australian SR racer, John Corbett, there, just nursing still a little bit of damage from that first corner contact, but good to see him back in the race.
Yeah, such a shame to have that early contact. If you did just join us, there was a coming together between Jesse Mensker, who was starting from pole position, and Jeremy Ferguson. As a pair of them tangled, effectively blocking the inside track through the source. Several others spun in avoidance. It gave us a very jumbled order for the first couple of laps, but now, as we're almost at half race distance, those that we expected to see towards the front of the field are exactly there. And it would appear as if Scott Mulvern and Scott Mansell are doing what we rather surmised, which is running in tandem and being content not to slow themselves down, because even with the handicaps, I suspect that Scott Mansell would back himself to be a little bit quicker than Nick Jones, who'll take over from Scott Mulvern in that white number 8 car through the pit stops, and also possibly a bit quicker than Edward Cockle as well.
And he has the greater freedom because he's a solo driver in terms of choosing when he can decide to pit. So yeah, whereas as perhaps the Kevin Mills racing team of Malvern and Jones will be looking to maybe leave Malvern out a little bit longer than half race distance, as we see some running repairs to the front of Corbett's car.
Front nose cone has clearly come second with something, so John Corbett makes the decision to come in and have his mandatory pit stop reasonably early on. Continuing on his way is John Harrison. As rejoining from the pits, we've got a couple of the Supersport runners. That's Ricardo Donut.
Yeah, and beside him, behind him there, Kim Burke as well.
Squeal of rubber through Eau Rouge, as also into the pits has come Tim Berryman. Berryman electing to get his pit stop out of the way, and with reasonably good reason, because from what we can see from our commentary position, which overlooks the pit lane and the start and finish straight, the clouds are not looking overwhelmingly ominous as a problem for Jamie Constable, who was in 3rd place and has come to a halt. Very unusual angle for the car to be stopped and pointing in, irrespective of whether or not that was mechanical or a spin.
Yeah, slightly precarious position there. The Marshals done a great job to get him out of the way quickly. But no, we just missed that spin off camera, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's a replay of that, exactly what happened.
We were just saying that although the skies are darkening, that there's very little likelihood it's going to rain in the next 4.5 minutes from what we can see. Therefore, they may as well get their pit stops complete. Meanwhile, the Cockles change position. Harry out, Edward in.
Yeah, this is a brother pairing that joined the Radical Enduro Championship at the start of the year and immediately impressed, taking a win in their first weekend. So yeah, expect very bright things from these guys. In the future, obviously former Ford Fiesta racers and also in Brit Car as well. But they've really made a big impression on the Enduro Championship in their inaugural year.
Harrison on his 11th lap. Is he going to be into the pits on this occasion? His lead over Stuart Mosley continues to be cleaved down. It's now fractionally over 4 seconds. Harrison, should he so desire, has got plenty more laps.
All the while, Hignett jumps out and lets another sports car in and GTA, Sally Hancock there jumping into the hot seat. And again, good to see him back in an SR3 as well after a few years away.
Cross line for Harrison and Mosley. The lead comes down to 2.7 seconds. Stuart Mosley flicks on his headlights, just in case anybody was in any doubt that he was on the charge. Jamie Constable, we would sadly seem to have completely lost from the race. We understand the car has been pushed up an escape route over at La Source. Therefore his day is done. Meanwhile, Brian Caldwell, who has been through the pits, now about to be lapped by John Harrison, who has not. And just in the back of that shot, you can see in the Sprint Championship the main rival to that red car of Caldwell. That's Ben Dimmock, who has also come through and had his pit stop, and has actually lost a little bit of ground in the pits, Ben Dimmock, to the tune of about 0.6 of a second, which he'll now need to try and race up on track. While Caldwell sees Mosley coming, Mosley to the inside of the Bruxelles hairpin, glides past. And now they're catching some of the slower cars. Part of it will be a case of how ruthless the drivers want to be with the traffic, but also it's a case of which corners you catch your rivals, because into Pouhon, for example, which is where they are now, if you're running in the racing line behind one of the slower SR3s as a Masters car, there's not really an awful lot you can do until they run on towards Vanya.
Yeah, that's right. It looks like Harrison's just caught Cockle at the right opportunity there and closed up to him through Pouhon, which gave him the drive into the pith path. We just see a replay here of is this Ron Fletcher just taking a spin? Yes, it is. Yeah. Oh, full rotation pretty much, but pointing in more or less the same direction and hopefully back on his way again.
And still, Stuart Mosley hasn't found a way past Ed Cockle, which he does now. But I think as a result, through this lap, it's pretty much as we were. The gap doesn't look like it's an awful lot less than 2 seconds. And what Stuart Mosley's done now is driven Jaap Bartels right into contention with John Harrison. Now that will be quite an interesting head-to-head fight in the second half of the race.
Yeah, two very seasoned, as we see both are electing to go into the pits at the same time. So here comes the race in the pit stops. Mosley and Bartels on a 45-second course. They're both, yeah, indeed, both Masters cars, of course, on an identical 45-second pit stop.
Absolutely brilliant race in prospect as the two leaders roll down the pit lane. John Harrison is going to, in the orange car, remain in the cockpit. He will be driving through to the checkered flag. Stuart Mosley will be jumping out.
And Nielsen teammates, of course, as well, so they're right side by side.
Let's pass over to Jaap Bartels. Of course, if Stuart Mosley was unsporting, this is when he now runs over to Harrison's car and lets the air out of his tyres. But he's not going to do it, so he sets to work strapping Jaap Bartels in. And for the Nielsen team, this is exactly what they want, the two cars at the front of the field. John Harrison clearly would like his visor being wiped, possibly forgetting for a moment that there are such strict limitations on how many people can work on the car.
Yeah, with the single driver teams, they can only have one person work on the car and one time. For the two driver teams, they're allowed an additional team member to effectively do the belts. But yeah, again, it's all to equalise the racing, and it means that it doesn't become checkbook racing. Of course, we can really closely control the costs. In the meanwhile, we see this is Tim Berryman back out on track, and he's got some lovely clear space around him to really make hay. So well, yeah, I wouldn't say while the sun shines, but certainly while he's got a clear opportunity.
We have got emerging gloom, and we've got a slippery surface flag that's being displayed as well. Somebody has also got the meatball flag being shown to them, the black and orange flag, which would suggest that there's been a mechanical issue and somebody may have dropped some fluid.
Just wonder if that's possibly a legacy of Constable's retirement, perhaps.
Could well be. Here is Harrison out front in lead of the race. Where is Jaap Bartels? There is Jaap Bartels.
And it would look like Harrison had a much stronger stop there than Mosley and Bartels, because they came into the pits pretty much together, but certainly not on the way out.
And then in third place, it's Tim Berryman. Jaap Bartels and Stuart Mosley, race winners this year in the Radical European Masters. Meanwhile, Jeremy Cottingham is being strapped in by Michael Vergers. Cottingham is probably better known for his exploits in historic motorsport.
And he was getting some fantastic instruction from Verge at Thursday, the Gold Track day here, and Verge was giving instructions to turn left, turn right, or speed up. And when he was asked if he had a sign for slowing down, well, Verge didn't have a sign for that.
Probably had a word. Carving through the traffic past Nikolai Arberg Hansen is our race leader, John Harrison. We have got just over 18 minutes left in this first of three races for the weekend, the Radical Sprint Championship and Radical Enduro Championship. We won't give you a full rundown of the classification just yet, because the positions that you can see on screen now are slightly interim. We've still got one or two cars yet to make their pit stops, the most prominent of which is Scott Mulvern, the head of the Supersport runners in the Radical Enduro Championship. And it is appreciably getting darker very suddenly now. Doesn't look like it is about to rain any second now, but it is certainly much gloomier than it was about 10 minutes or so ago. Now, the race was declared a wet race. What that means is that they're not going to throw out the red flags and stop it so everybody can change tyres if it does start raining. It was left to the team's own discretion whether they started on slicks or wets.
Oh, a big slide there by Jaap, and did a great job to gather it up as he ran out onto the rumble strips.
And that is Jeremy Ferguson, who has just been passed by Jaap Bartels. Don't think that's going to be Ferguson right up there at the sharp end of the field. In fact, it's possibly a lap down for Ferguson. We'll work that out.
Just seeing John Harrison there making a pass on Mark Crader. And yeah, great to see Crader here racing at Spa, his first European outing, and a former graduate of the Radical SR1 Cup, and a real sort of excellent demonstration of the Radical racing ladder.
And Crader was spectacular in SR1 Cup as well, and he's running very strongly at the moment. 21st place at present. Scott Mulvern has only now come into the pits to hand over to Nick Jones. Bartels in second. It's a pretty solid second. Struggling to understand quite how Jeremy Ferguson has arrived in the track position that he's currently got, because he was a minute behind the race leaders when we last saw them. Either he has had an extremely slow pit stop, or he has had possibly an unduly rapid one.
Yeah, and I'm sure the clerk, of course, Brian, put a fantastic lick of flame there from the back of Bartels' car, but now I'm sure the race control will be looking at in close order. And also, yeah, I was quite surprised to see that late pit stop by Malvern, and I'm just not sure if they perhaps possibly missed the pit window.
I think it was a case when they went past the pit board as around goes Brian Cordwell. I suspect you were right, Will, about Jamie Constable's car. There's a big pool of fluid just on the exit of the Lasau's hairpin, which is possibly catching one or two of them out. Yeah, Bartels about to cross the line to confirm his second place in the race. Harrison is already through into his 15th lap. There is John Harrison. Here is Jack Bartels into the pit lane, was going Jeremy Ferguson. Jack Bartels in second place. Tim Berryman is up into third. Question's going to be then, who is leading the Supersport runners? Once this is all shaken out, has Nick Jones been given enough by Scott Mulvin to emerge ahead of Scott Mansell and Ed Cockle? Interestingly, Mansell did get the jump on Cockle through the pit stops.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll see as the as you say, as the timing screens unravel in this next lap or so, exactly who sits where, and this is again where these success seconds are going to have made a big difference. Berryman there has to jing right just to make his way past Gossingham there on his next lap.
Well, at least Michael Vergers didn't teach him hand signals to wave past the cars lapping him. This has been a very, very impressive drive from Tim Berryman, and there is a possibility that second place might just be on the cards here, depending on how quickly Jack Bartels gets up to speed, because Bartels' last lap was a 2 minutes 25.2 versus a 2 minutes 23.1.
Yeah, gap now 6 seconds with just under 14 minutes remaining. So yeah, this isn't out of contention at all by any means for the Australian.
Okay, here we go then with the Supersport battle, and it is Scott Mansell who leads from Nick Jones, then Ed Cockle is in third place. Ben Dimmock is now up to fourth amongst the Supersports, and he is the leading sprint championship runner as well, in a fine seventh.
Yeah, so the big question now is how long it's going to take. I would think that Ed Cocker will be able to, in fairly short order, catch up to the back of Nick Jones. It's whether or not Nick will be able to defend then.
Well, as the race has unfolded, the damp patches that we had offline have begun to dry out. It's Ricardo Dona to the inside of Ben Dimmock. Dimmock saw him coming, and rather let Dona kebab himself, or at least skewer himself, about breaking himself, and run. Oh, and then he jumps back over the sausage curb.
Yeah, a little bit of a risky move there, and as you come into the bus stop, you're sort of confronted if you outbrake yourself by a tyre wall that's difficult to get around, but maybe could have left that a little bit later before he rejoined the circuit. All the while, though, as you say, Scott Mansell out here at the front of the Supersport class and doing a sterling job. His last lap there at 2:26, so he's really on the pace.
And he's already 6.5 seconds clear of Nick Jones. Scott Mansell, this is beginning to look pretty good as we head towards the final phase of the race. We've got just under quarter distance remaining. And for Scott Mansell, it is about the traffic now. It's Ron Fletcher who is just ahead of him. Don't think Ron is going to provide any unnecessary obstruction or distraction. Indeed he doesn't. Oh yes he does! He moves right across into the path of Scott Mulvin, and I'm not sure they quite saw each other, and it's Fletcher who gets skittled off into the gravel trap. We'll have another look at that. Talk about curse of the commentator.
Yeah, I think he was expecting, he obviously saw him in his left hand mirror and thought that he was perhaps still there and going to pass him on the inside, and Malvin elected to go the other side where there was more space and just caught him out. If he can keep that car rolling and keep some momentum, can he make it? No, he's beached it. Oh, that's such a shame.
He's going to require a little bit of assistance to get out of there as well, or Ron Fletcher, and that is a great pity. Here's another look at it. Fletcher backs off, allows Mansell past him, and Mansell just eases across to the racing line, and that was a misunderstanding between both drivers, pure and simple. Fletcher obviously assumed that Mansell would give him racing room. I think Scott Mansell, the way that Ron Fletcher backed off as they come out of the previous corner, suspects he was going to back off altogether.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if perhaps
past.
Yeah, as you say, if Mansell was just perhaps surprised that the speed differential wasn't as great as he maybe initially thought. As we see the recovery truck moving into view to get that cleared up pretty quickly and get back to racing.
I suspect it was something along those lines. Our order, therefore, with just over 10 minutes to go, is John Harrison leads. Second place is Jack Bartels. Third is Tim Berryman. Fourth, and leading the Supersport class, leading the Enduro Championship component of the race, is Scott Mansell. In fifth, we have got Nick Jones. Sixth is Ed Cockle. Seventh, and leading the Sprint Championship element of the race, is Ben Dimmock. Eighth place, we've got Ricardo Dona. Ninth is Steve Burgess. 10th, Brian Caldwell. Up into 11th, we're all delighted to see him there, is Marcello Maratiotto, and then in 12th it's Kim Berg.
Yeah, Kim's done a fantastic job actually. He managed to sort of steer his way through the that first corner, busy. The various contacts managed to emerge unscathed from that. Has just very quietly worked his way back up through the field. So yeah, a really good result for the Australian SR3 driver.
And just as you predicted, Will, now we have got that battle for second place amongst the super sports that's coming alive, because Ed Cockle has closed right up onto the tail of Nick Jones. They run downhill towards Pouant. Swing through the fast left-hander. Ben Dimmock has got Ricardo Dona and Steve Burgess behind him. And Burgess is doing what he does best, isn't he? Just having an unobtrusive race, but he's right up there in the points-paying places when it matters.
Yeah, and having a look here, I think I mean there's only 15 points in the standings between him and Cockle at the moment, and after Spa then we're on to the final round at Brands Hatch 1 week later, so he really needs to think about consolidating his position, not taking any risk here at Spa this weekend. Not only from an actual championship scoring point of view, but obviously he also needs to preserve the car. There's not many days to turn it around before Brands Hatch, so yeah, he'll need to have a considered and sensible drive this weekend if he wants to maintain that lead.
And the last thing you want to do in a triple header weekend is
throw it away at the beginning.
Yeah, put the car into the barriers in race 1 and do enough damage that it can't be repaired in time for next weekend.
No, that's right. But no, I mean, knowing Steve, and he did exactly what he needed to do last season in the Clubman's Cup, and was a very, very dominant champion. You see Dimmock outbraking himself there, and just looking to get back on. He just needs to be mindful of his mirrors as he goes 3 abreast. Is Burgess going to be able to hold on to that position as
Cockle looks to the inside of Jones? So Ed Cockle to the inside of Nick Jones and goes into second place. What about the second group of cars?
Who are we going to see come out here? No, Dona holds on to the place just ahead of Burgess, and then Dimmock just behind.
So in terms of the championship, that's going to be a frustration for Burgess to see Cockle has gained another place, and it means that Steve Burgess is glued to the rear of Ricardo Dona's car as they swoop uphill, coming out of Eau Rouge along the Kemmel Straight now. Head down from Steve Burgess. In pursuit of Ricardo Dona, this is the fight for 7th and 8th place in the race overall.
You did almost get a sense there of what we were just talking about there as that incident unfolded at the bus stop, as Burgess this time, he's outbraked himself though. That's a long run across the grass. Is he going to stop in time?
He just keeps his right foot planted and does very well to rejoin without flinging it into the scenery. He should back off now and allow both Dimmock and Dona to go back past him.
And indeed he has.
To the frustration there of Steve Burgess, Ben Dimmock was able to pass Ricardo Dona in the melee, and that has possibly held him up a little bit more than he would have liked.
So really in the space of 2 laps, he's had 2 situations there that he really needs to keep himself out of and give a wide berth to these other scraps.
Again, slightly cursed the commentator, saying he was staying out of trouble, and promptly gets himself into a little bit of it. Meanwhile, the fight for second in the race has begun to close up very nicely. Now, it would appear as if it is looking very dark over at Les Combes at the moment. Don't think it's raining just yet, but certainly it's looking a little bit treacherous as Tim Berriman thinks about forcing the move to the inside of Jaap Bartels into the Bruxelles hairpin. Bartels, though, wise to it and does a good job, in fact, of getting the car stopped. That very steep downhill section, then flick through the left and down towards Pouant. We've seen an utterly astonishing move earlier this year for the Renault 3.5 into Pouant by Mathieu Vaxivière when he went around the outside of his rival. Berriman was thinking to the inside of Jaap Bartels on that occasion, and he couldn't quite make it stick, as we have got 6.25 minutes left in the race. So they're going to have time for 3 more laps at the end of this one. Here's another look at Steve Burgess.
He must have been wincing as he got onto that grass there, just no idea how much traction he was going to have, but yeah, very, very lucky to keep it rolling in a straight line and rejoin the track as we see Yanni Herpy there, just having a quick spin again at Les Combes, but back on his way in fairly short order.
What we have seen throughout the course of this race is that Tim Berriman is very quick through the mid and high speed stuff. He's just not quite got the experience in these spiders yet to have the confidence on the brakes, and that is something that Jaap Bartels is going to be hoping to use to good advantage over the next few minutes. And around goes Berriman at the bus stop chicane. Just as we were again saying that Berriman has struggled with some of the heavier braking zones, and I think he's lost the engine Could see him frantically trying to get the car restarted. And now it fires up. He's on his way. He's in a very secure third. He's not going to lose that. But all hope of second place has disappeared.
Just a little bit over there. You go there on the brakes into the brake, into that braking zone for the bus stop. Snatched a front wheel and it was all over. The car was facing backwards. So a great shame there, as he's shown real promise throughout the weekend. But no, I'm sure he'll be somebody to watch in race 2.
Here is our race leader, John Harrison. Harrison now 12.5 seconds clear of Jaap Bartels. And this will be a very welcome result for Harrison, provided it keeps going, because there have been times this year where he has had blistering pace alongside Victor Crea, but for whatever reason, circumstances have conspired to stop them winning.
Yeah, this will be a great boost going into the latter stages of his European Masters campaign. So they'll be next out at Monza and then ending the year at Barcelona, as we just see another replay here of Berriman's rotation.
He just misjudged the level of mechanical grip that was available when...
Yeah, I'm just wondering if he maybe just caught a little bit of damp again on the inside of the corner there that caught him out.
He did put a wheel over the curb on the braking zone.
But no, this will give Harrison some much needed momentum in the final 2 events of the European Masters Championship, and he's just got stronger and stronger all season, and really he's one of the front runners and one of the leading lights in the Masters class in that championship at the moment.
Well, the next challenge for Harrison is Lappery of Elliot Goodman. There is Goodman, the black car, just ahead of Harrison as they accelerate out of Stavelot, rejoin essentially the old Spa-Francorchamps circuit. Meanwhile, Ricardo Dona has got himself right onto terms with Nick Jones. Dona looks to the outside, can't go for the switchback. Nicely defended by Jones, who then runs wide, carries a little bit too much momentum, but he still keeps himself clear of Dona, as Ben Dimmock has a much more spectacular moment running wide. Now that's going to cost Dimmock, because he had Brian Caldwell right behind him, and I suspect that Caldwell may well have gained a place through all of that. We'll find out momentarily.
And once again, Burgess finds himself in the middle of a real wheel-to-wheel battle. So
it's a heck of a tow, isn't it, being given off as well, when you've got the 2 cars in front punching the hole in the air, and that is what's bringing Steve Burgess immediately into this battle. Meanwhile, behind the yellow car of Dimmock is still just clear of the blue machine of Caldwell.
Yeah, and Ollie Hancock right in the fight there as well. So he's done a fantastic job to battle up through the field, and I wouldn't count him out for taking a couple of extra places as we go into this last 2 laps.
It's Ricardo Dona going to look to the inside of Nick Jones into the Bruxelles hairpin. The corner invites you to have a little bit of a lunge, but then takes that gap away as it swoops downhill. And television really can't do justice as to just how steep this section of the circuit is. It is immensely challenging.
Yeah, I mean, and the way that either side of the circuit, these sort of 50, 100 foot cliffs either side, as you say, it really doesn't give you an idea of the scale of the gradient change here either.
And Burgess sees a gap to the inside of Peugeot, gains the place on Ricardo Dona. Now that's more championship points here for Steve Burgess. If he can find a way past Nick Jones, he'll just be 1 place behind the Cockles as they arrive at the flag, and that would also put him on the Enduro Championship podium. Plenty to race for, therefore, for the orange and green car. Steve Burgess, it's the white and blue car, and Nick Jones just ahead of him. Ricardo Dona is the white and red car, the yellow helmeted driver in behind them. That is probably the closest battle that we're going to be looking for in, I think it's going to be the penultimate lap of the race that they're going to be starting. Scott Mansell, by the way, it is who leads the Supersport class, and comfortably so. Burgess thinks about looking for the move into the bus stop chicane, tries to force Jones to outbrake himself, which he does. Jones has to take a very tight line through the exit of the bus stop.
Oh,
Burgess!
Big slide there from Burgess. So it's obviously a little bit over exuberant on the exit, thought he could get on the power early, and it's cost him dearly and allowed Dona back through.
Burgess was a little bit caught out. Jones knew he made a mistake, but recovered very nicely by just slowing the car through the apex, preventing the others from getting the switchback, and Dona now eases past Jones. They, in fact, are looking to go side by side downhill into Eau Rouge. Burgess joins the fight as well, and Jones loses the 2 places. So they swoop uphill. Steve Burgess right in the tow behind Ricardo Dona. We are as we were. Dona consults the mirrors. Could barely see Burgess, who now attempts to draw alongside along the Kemmel Straight. Burgess may well be able to make
Looks
this
like
move
he's
stick.
just about got the drive, providing he's good and strong on the brakes, and yes, he has made. That's a really good drive there into LeCun.
Great stuff from Steve Burgess. He's had to work at it, but he now moves up to third place in the Supersport class. Here for the final time is our race leader John Harrison. Harrison was aided and abetted in his escape by the first corner entanglement, but thereafter has driven absolutely imperiously.
Yeah, fantastic. He's really dictated the pace at the front and a good consistent, lapping consistently in the 224s, and has just managed to maintain that gap between himself and Bartels. A fantastic drive for this solo Guernsey man.
Down through the left-hander on towards Pouhon. Still got several kilometres of racing to go. Nonetheless, Harrison has utterly dominated this race. He knew when Stuart Mosley closed up onto his tail that he would probably have the legs on Jaap Bartels in the second half of the race, so it has proved. And Harrison's had that luxury of a buffer throughout the course of the race to plot his path through the traffic, to run at a pace that suits him and not unduly risk himself or the car.
No, as you say, he knew that rather than overdriving in that period as he came under pressure from Mosley, he knew that he could afford to just maintain the pace. He didn't really need to respond because he'd have the legs in the second half, and that was a very, very good choice.
He's not going to catch John McLeod for Lapri either. For the flag, as Harrison heads through the final couple of turns, just the bus stop chicane awaits. And it is going to be victory in the first of 3 races this weekend in the Radical Enduro Championship, Radical Sprint Championship for John Harrison. He heads out of the bus stop chicane. The checker flag is ready and waiting, and Harrison takes the flag and victory, and has it by a long, long margin. Here comes Jaap Bartels. He and Stuart Mosley, don't forget, from the very, very back of the grid, taking an excellent second place finish. And then in third, we are awaiting, here he comes now, Tim Berryman. Berryman, a fantastic debut here in Spa for him.
Yeah, very impressive debut in the Spider as well. Of course, getting used to that very different handling car from the SR8 that he's more accustomed to in Australia. So a fine result for him, given the various scares he's had throughout the race.
Then have quite a long pause before Scott Mansell comes through to claim victory amongst the Enduro Championship runners.
The question, I think, is going to be, who do we see first? Will it be Ricardo Donut or Steve Burgess? Because they were scrapping all the way to the end of that race there.
I would suspect a smooth lap from Burgess will be enough to see him overhauling Ricardo Donut, but we will find out imminently. Scott Mansell, though, another beautifully judged performance, although he is yet to set flag. Here comes the Burgess and Donut battle, and you know what, they've caught Ed Cockle as well through the course of this last lap. This isn't all done and dusted just yet, and this is a battle with real championship connotations as well.
Yeah, an opportunity for one final throw of the dice here from Burgess, perhaps.
Just wonder whether or not the Cockles went a little bit light on fuel or something, or whether or not Ed's had a mistake out of our sight, because the pace with which Burgess and Donor have reeled him in has been formidable. At the same time, they've also dropped Nick Jones very rapidly. Cockle consults his mirrors. Here comes Scott Mansell. Mansell wins the Supersport class, wins the endurance component of the race. It's then this which is the battle for second place amongst the Supersport cars. Is Burgess close enough to have a little bit of a lunge into the last turn? No, he's not. He'll be hoping for a mistake from Ed Cockle. None is forthcoming. Therefore, Cockle comes through, and he, alongside brother Harry, take 5th in the race overall, 2nd amongst the Supersports, and Steve Burgess completing the Supersport podium. Meanwhile, taking the flag now in the bright yellow car, raising a fist in triumph because he has won the Sprint Championship element of the race, is Ben Dimmock, with 2nd amongst the Sprint Championship runners, Brian Caldwell, and 3rd, John McLeod.
Yeah, and a really close result there, actually, in the end between Dimmock and Caldwell. Just 1/10 of a second between them after 50 minutes of racing, so a fantastic race there all the way to the end. And in fact, we just see a very late spin there. I'm just trying to see who that was.
I think it's Maritiotto.
Yes, I think you're right there. That yeah, last heart palpitation there for Dimap, but did a great job.
So let's have a look then at the final result. John Harrison wins it from Bartels and Mosley in second. Tim Berryman completes the podium. Scott Mansell, the first Supersport runner, in fourth. From the Cockles in fifth. Steve Burgess in sixth. Great drive from Ricardo Donor, seventh. The same from Ollie Hancock, who claimed eighth place. Then we had Nick Jones, Scott Malvern. They faded to ninth late on, 10th, and Sprint Championship honours going the way of Ben Dimmock, clear of John Corbett, Brian Caldwell, Marcello Maritotto, Michelle Frey in 13th, and Kim Burke in 14th. John McLeod, the last unlapped car, in 15th. Case of maybe what might have been for Mike Cantillon and Jamie Constable, both of them retiring early on. And also Jeremy Ferguson, he was caught up in the first lap contact with our pole sitter, Jesse Menska. So a very entertaining start to the weekend for the Radicals. We have got two races to look forward to from the Radicals tomorrow, and they are at 10:50 local time and then also 4:20 local time. Let's have another look at the best of the race then. And this was one of the big talking points. Pole sitter Jesse Menska just missing his braking point into La Source, locked up and tagged into Jeremy Ferguson, and he in turn took Mike Cantillon around with him for company, several others spinning in avoidance further back. What that served to do was rather jumble the field, which got further mixed after that slight contact between Scott Malvern and Simon Halton. So we had an excellent scrap for second place between Jamie Constable and Tim Berryman, as scything through the field behind them was a charging Stuart Mosley. Mosley eventually snatching third place from Constable after a ferociously brave move into Eau Rouge before climbing on uphill to challenge Berryman, who got caught up lapping a slower car. That happened without any particular drama. And that put Mosley into second place. Behind, amongst the Supersports, we had some super scrapping. But through it all, it was Scott Mansell who emerged out front, but then he made contact with Ron Fletcher, dispatching Fletcher into the gravel trap. Tim Berryman was in pursuit of Jaap Bartels for second place late on, before that spin took away his chances of victory. John Harrison scoring pretty much a light to flag victory, in command of the race ever since they exited La Source for the first time, and he won it. Well, on behalf of Will Brown and myself, Ben Evans, thank you very much for joining us for all of the action today. We will see you at 10 to 11 tomorrow as the Radical Sprint and Radical Enduro Championship race weekend here at Spa continues.